So we will record tonight so that we can upload this later to our YouTube channel. So anyone who might have missed anything or anything that you want to go back and rewatch, it is there and it's available 24/7 for you at your leisure. Like I say, thanks so much for joining us for our U12 and U13 CMSA Town Hall tonight. We love the investment of players, of coaches, of parents, and referees even that are on tonight, as well as even some club administrators. So it means a lot to us that people are so deeply invested and also curious and want to find some knowledge and want to find some information and also take part in a discussion. So thank you all for joining. We know that you could be doing anything and anywhere in the world right now. So for that, we're very grateful that you join us here tonight. We'd like to start off tonight with a land acknowledgement. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. We'll get going tonight with a quick video that really encapsulates what CMSA does and what we really are. We like to think of ourselves as more than just a league operator. We're also a governing body. We're support for the clubs. We are information providers for our parents, for our referees. We want to be innovators and leaders in the game in Canada. And really, we want to build and galvanize an incredibly strong community and culture within soccer here in Calgary, especially at the youth levels, so that hopefully they continue to play or coach or give back to their clubs and the game that gives them something as well. So this video is a quick year in review of 2020. Please give it a watch and sit back and enjoy. We are incredibly proud of what we accomplished in 2022, and we hope to build on that for an even bigger 2023. Without the support of the people internally at CMSA, but then also all of the parents, the coaches, the administrators, the players, and the referees, we couldn't make stuff like this happen. So the countless hours that volunteers put into the game, and also really the countless hours that some of the staff put in at CMSA make these things happen. And two of those people on the line tonight are Kim Kerr and Rachel Hugh. And these two women dedicate an enormous amount of time to really making soccer happen within Calgary. Alone, they've scheduled probably close to 5,000 games just for this outdoor season. And just within the U10s to U12s is around 2,200 games. So these two women have literally gone nonstop 12 and 14 hours a day all of April. And I think all they had off was Good Friday. They've put in a tremendous amount of work and time and effort into trying to get it right and to do what's best for our clubs and for our players in that regard. So without them, I certainly wouldn't be able to accomplish what I've accomplished or to push things forward within Calgary here. And to them, I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude, and I'm honored and lucky to have them on the call tonight. So they're going to be helping out in terms of monitoring the Q&A, and then also potentially jumping in here and there. My name is Jordan Stewart, and it's a pleasure to be with you tonight. I am the CMSA technical leader, which is really just a fancy title for I try and help out the league. I try and help out our clubs, try and develop our coaches, try and put in strategies for our referees, and really try and worry about everything that happens within the white lines and not really outside of the white lines. I've worked with players as young as 4 or 5 kind of thing, all the way up to senior levels within the universities. And my previous employer was Alberta Soccer, where I was the regional coach for Southern Alberta and the Alberta Recs director. And really my roles there were around player development, district outreach, so supporting the districts with their programming, and the coach education realm within Alberta here. I've got experience working in our grassroots clubs, granted up in Edmonton, in professional academies, the PSOs, youth national team development systems, and youth national team camps, colleges and universities, and also district governing bodies. So I've worked at just about every single level of the game here in Alberta, and I've got a pretty diverse lens on the game in Canada here through much of my network around the country. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be contributing to the game here in Calgary, and to be pushing things forward potentially in a way that's never been done before. When I was first brought on to CMSA, I was asked to write a technical plan, which really set the tone and the direction for the organization from the technical side. And it had 3 kind of areas of focus. And the first one was on governing the technical side of the game. The next was on developing, and the last was on grow. And so I'll provide a quick overview really of what those kinds of areas entailed, and kind of where we're at with some of the processes and implementing some of the change and also refinements. You'll see there at the bottom of your screen lots of club consultations to improve what they do on the grass, but then also what their match day experience is like within the CMSA. You'll see things like town halls, where we want to interact with our members and hear their questions and hear some of their issues and also their ideas. And then also modifying the match rules to prioritize enjoyment and development. Gives you kind of a brief overview in terms of the government piece. With the develop area, we've had to delay a couple of pieces around the Parent Advisory Council and the Parent Development Series that we wanted to do. There's been some factors that have kind of postponed those pieces, but a lot of this is ongoing or complete right now, with much of it revolving around SQS and club licensing. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. And lastly, within the grow area, we wanted to reduce the average travel time for matches for families to bring the game closer to home post-pandemic. We know that people found a new love or maybe re-found a love of being together and being close and having their community close to them. So we wanted to make sure that we brought the game as close as possible to everyone, while also trying to ignite certain areas of the game that needed addressed, like women and girls in soccer, and having pathways for them to be coaches, to be referees, to be administrators, and really just to be better and stay with the game throughout their youth. And then lastly, just some preliminary talks are being held to engage with our members in a way that we never have before in terms of an esports league, and providing a different avenue and opportunity to enjoy the game of soccer in a completely different context. And we keep thinking about what the player needs and who that player is and what's going to see them have longevity within this game or within soccer and the culture around soccer. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the Canada Soccer Player Pathway for a moment, where it's vital to understand the levels really that CMSA operate and the pathways that there are within Calgary and within the local environment. We operate, and what I'll do is I'll skip ahead here. We operate at stages 1, 2, 3, and 7 in terms of Soccer for Life Community and Soccer for Life Competitive. We will look to collaborate with CUSA, with Calgary Women's, and then also within the AYSL to provide pathways for our players. You'll see here that players can flow up through or across the diagram, judging by the arrows, and they'll flow into programs like the Rex and Whitecaps boys, into youth national teams or full residency programs in Vancouver, all the way through to full-on professional football and senior national teams. You'll see here in terms of AMSL, the Alberta Major Soccer League, which would be a soccer for life competitive stream for people who want to continue to compete into their adulthood. And you might not recognize this little logo here in terms of the newly launched League One Alberta. It's a brand new venture that's a semi-pro league that I would encourage everyone to get out and support, watch some games, because there's some absolutely fabulous players that have been re-signed and brought back from colleges and universities across North America to compete in this league. It's going to be fantastic, and I will definitely be buying seasons tickets to probably a couple of the franchises. We always create what we call the CMSA program handbook before every season. And really, this is a roadmap for our clubs to begin to structure their registration packages on. They will be able to go and look at this and then be able to open their registration with accuracy and consistency across their programs. So what I would encourage you to do is to have a look at this. It's available on our website at calgaryminersoccer.com, and reflect on your club's registration information. One, was it accurate? And two, is it aligned to what we're actually asking and requiring? If there's some gaps there, I would like you to consider why there's maybe gaps, and what they need to do in order to close those up. Lots of questions in terms of League One there. You can definitely find League One Alberta information on the Alberta Soccer website, or follow along on their socials, and there'll be plenty of information around the League One initiative. One of the biggest changes that's happened in Canadian soccer landscape and potentially in Canada soccer's history is around the club licensing and requiring clubs to meet certain standards to continue to be involved in the sanctioned game. And SQS stands for Standards for Quality Soccer. This has got a deadline of May 1st, and it really is a way to mitigate risk while also having some consumer assurances that you're actually sending your children to a reputable organization that meets some bare minimum standards, coach standards and required training. And when I say the same, I mean the bare minimum coaching standards and training, including clubs that have already achieved a national youth club license. These are non-negotiable standards. These are set out by Canada Soccer and then implemented locally and delivered locally through districts and provinces. And so some of those coaching standards are around if it's either a modified safe sport roster or a full safe sport roster requirement. And through club consultation and much stakeholder consultation, we've decided to initially set the line between U11 and U12, pardon me, where the requirements for coaches will become more from U12 onwards due to the increased potential of risk within that environment, and also the increased level of training needed to work with those players. Many of the clubs felt that we were far too generous setting that at U12, and they actually felt that it should be either at U10 or U7 in terms of a full safe sport roster requirement. There's an additional 5 courses or 5 modules that need to be completed from the modified safe sport roster to the full safe sport roster, and we'll chat about those in a moment. The question always comes up is, what is CMSA going to do about the clubs who do not choose to adhere to those standards or do not want to adopt those standards? Really, there's a lot of loopholes that clubs have gotten away with over a long time, and those are quickly being closed up with some of these standards. Things like they would put one person on all the rosters that has completed Respect in Sport. It's no longer applicable. All coaches, whether head coaches, assistant coaches, developmental coaches, even the dog coach that shows up once in a while, will have to be completing Respect in Sport to be eligible on those rosters. along with some other modules depending on the age group that they're working with. And there's also a club accountability piece within this to do what's right, not just what's easy. So I would encourage you to ask your clubs, what sort of qualifications do the coaches that are working with my children have? What sort of training does the club provide them? What sort of informal development do they do in some of their own time? Because these pieces are important to understand what sort of environment is going to be curated for your kids as well. And really, the club's willingness to adhere to basic standards is going to determine their longevity in the game here in Calgary and in the game period. It's not a threat. It's just the reality and our new reality within the club licensing system and within a standards-based club environment. You'll see on your screen here the minimum coaching standards that we're requiring for all of our coaches broken down via age group. Where you see a check mark, that is required for all coaches and team managers and any other team officials. So say you had a physiotherapist that was working with your team, or say that you had a strength and conditioning coach, our expectation would be that they have a valid police clearance with vulnerable sector search. They would also be required to have completed Respect in Sport Activity Leader, and this is a non-negotiable for us. You will also see along, if you scroll horizontally or look horizontally along the table, you'll see required education for coaches and assistant coaches. So you'll see things like making ethical decisions with the evaluation completed. You'll see making headway, which is a concussion awareness module. You'll see rule of two, which is understanding that all communications with players and all interactions with players, especially minors, should be observable and justifiable, and that a child should never be left alone solo with an adult. And then you'll also see emergency action planning. So when and if an injury or an emergency happens, what is the plan and how do we enact that emergency action plan? Sliding along, you'll also see requirements for a coaching course theory piece, which is an online module delivered through Canada Soccer, and a practical on-field piece, which is delivered through CMSA and Alberta Soccer. That's the full safe sport roster that's required for any coach, U12 and above, within our CMSA leagues. You're probably wondering, if you're a coach, well, when can I do these practical sessions? Well, here's the list of courses that we've got available, along with the capacity for the course on the right and how many registrants were on the left. This was done and compiled about a day and a half ago. So these numbers might have gone up slightly, but this is about as accurate as we've got right now. You can see there is loads of room in these courses. So again, if you have a coach working with your team, ask them if they've done their practical component. And if not, I would be encouraging them to register for some of these courses. I'll skip over this one. We've created a coaching pathway handbook as well that coaches can access and have an easy pathway for them to follow. You'll see here that they would start within the U12 plus, flow through and get their police clearance, and then it's kind of a choose your own adventure from here. You would then filter through into Soccer for Life, and then down into the bottom blue courses at the bottom of your screen. We wanted to also provide a quick overview of the scheduling process within CMSA. And really, this is a almost month-long process that occurs a couple of times per year that our clubs and ourselves will go through to try and get it right. So first, the Tier 1 declarations come in, and this happened on March 28th. So we start our outdoor planning quite early, probably not as early as I think some people would like, but that is about as early as we can start it. And this gives us a sense of what some of our leagues are going to look like. Then come April 3rd was team entry time, where clubs will put in all of the teams that they want to enter within a CMSA league, and they will put them into the divisions where they feel that they can compete. Then probably the most vital piece of all of this is the Club Connect, where we bring in all of the technical leaders from all the clubs in Calgary to discuss every single team in all the divisions. And they get a chance to look at where their teams are in what division and evaluate if they're going to have meaningful competition with the other teams in that division. If they will, they stay. If they won't, they then move their team from division to division. This is also an opportunity for us to see how viable some divisions are. And divisions with a limited amount of teams will often be combined with another tier or division, or those teams will find another place to play in another division. So you might see some ages or some mixed age teams. You might see some slightly older teams in some of these leagues, but this is where a lot of the movement happens. That's April 5th. Then we send all of that compiled information back out to all of the clubs where they have one last look at it to see if there's anyone who's been missed, to see if there's any errors, and they submit back anything that might have been missed or errors. We then compile that and put them into our computer programs and put them into some Excel sheets as well with some of the preset play dates for some of these age groups. You'll see that our 17s and 19s have moved off of the weekend to allow for those athletes to, one, have a social life, and two, try to have some part-time employment as well. That's some of the feedback that we've gotten, and we're trying to adjust our programming to meet those kids' needs as well. Those preset play dates are what we try to schedule around. And some of the misalignment kind of goes like this sometimes, or sometimes like that, is really because of the field permits that we have from the city of Calgary. So we might have a lot of field permits on one night and a very limited amount on another night because other user groups have got those field permits. We put all of those pieces together, or try to as best as we can, and we look to build the schedule. Then once a schedule is built, Rachel and Kim spend days and days manipulating the schedule by hand to try to ensure that, say, out-of-town teams like Lethbridge or Cochrane don't have an 8 a.m. kickoff at the opposite side of the city, and also so that there's try to have an equal balance of home and away games per division. Then there's obviously tournaments that teams attend, and there's bad weather and locusts and fog and smoke and any other sort of environmental hazard that will cause us to reschedule games throughout the year. Then we just do it all over again, season after season. And you'll see at the bottom of your screen, almost 5,200 games were scheduled across 60 divisions in the indoor season. And I believe we're somewhere in around that, if not more, for this outdoor season. Where we are right now is we are definitely in the kind of stage 9 of our scheduling, and we've gone through that entire process. So it's a very, very thorough, very time-consuming process, and really a thankless task for both Kim and Rachel. So to them, thank them very much. And I made the comment a couple of nights ago that even with that number of games, if we operate at 99% efficiency, there's still going to be almost 50 or 60 games that don't come off very well, that potentially are double booked, that a referee doesn't show up for. And that is a fact of kind of what we go through at CMSA. We can't operate at 100. We wish we could, but that's kind of our realities. I'm going to pause for a second as there's a couple of questions in the chat about coach training. And the first question is around, shouldn't we try to get coaches to have first aid training? 100%. I believe that any coach or anyone who's left kind of caretaking a group of children should have some sort of first aid or CPR training because of the multitude of things that can happen and could happen. So for sure, they should have some first aid training. As a requirement, though, I will put it this way: we hear a lot of feedback from coaches, from clubs, that requiring volunteers to do a police clearance and to do a 3-hour respect in sport course, as well as an 1.5-hour online coaching course, is far too much for a volunteer. We have gotten used to standards being so unbelievably low in our soccer environment that even the requirement of a police clearance is sometimes difficult for people to understand. So we've had to take a gradual approach that says, right, here are the basic standards. And over time, we'll get to a more advanced standard where, yes, potentially coaches will have first aid training, or when the training model shifts within clubs, that leader that's at the club training will have first aid training, and that will be a requirement of them to be a part of CMSA. We can't make a ton of wholesale changes overnight because of costs, because of time, etc. And so really we want to make sure that it's a gradual change and that it's implemented appropriately rather than moving really fast and breaking things like we have in some aspects. We'd prefer to take a gradual approach and retain people within the game. There's another question in terms of took some education modules for coaching in 2017. Are those still deemed valid? They don't show up in the NCCP account for whatever reason. Just send me an email and I will be more than happy to look into this for you in the coming days. They should show up if you've completed everything that was necessary. If not, they likely will not show up and you're likely deficient in something, but we can take a look at that or try to track it down. I'd like to make sure that there's an awareness of the biobanding initiative that CMSA does across all of their leagues, and it will likely be happening within the U12s and U13s. Really, this is a player placement tool where clubs are able to place players at a level that is appropriate for them based on their biological maturation and not just the chronological maturation of them. So they might look like a 2011 or 2012 or a 2010 in terms of on the calendar, but they might actually be a 2013 or a 2012 in terms of how they're physically growing. And so usually when people hear, well, you're going to play down an age group, they see that almost like being demoted in your job, when really our coaches and our clubs are using this as a tool to find the right environment that's going to help that player both enjoy the game, but also to develop through it. So I would ask that if your club is asking you to be biobanded, you ask the question of why and what your child's going to get out of it, but also realize that it's likely for their own benefit and for their own enjoyment. There's professional clubs all over the world that do this, and a club like Tottenham believe that their players will play 70% of the time in their own age group, 15% of the time they'll play up, and 15% of the time they'll actually play down an age group, regardless if you're the best player in the group or the worst player in the group. The process around this is that the clubs will submit a form and they're to inform the parents and have the parents sign off on it. They will then contact the rest of the clubs and teams within that age group to notify them that they have biobanded players on their team. So this is a method to keep them accountable and to build trust within the community so that there isn't some sort of biobanding to win games happening. What we've seen is the vast majority, and when I say vast majority, I would say out of 180 odd players who were biobanded in the indoor season, I believe it was only about 8.5% of players were biobanded onto a team that finished first, second, or third within their league. So this to us tells us that this isn't being manipulated by the clubs. There is a high degree of trust, and that the clubs are utilizing this appropriately so far. There's a couple of questions in the chat. We will get to those as we go forward. So hold on and we will make sure we get to those. There's always a piece here in terms of the conduct expectations for everyone involved. When I say everyone involved, I don't just mean parents, I don't just mean coaches, I don't just mean players, but referees, administrators, and ourselves as well. And really, all of us are going to be the ones who set the standard for what's acceptable and not acceptable in this outdoor 2023 season. If we deem it acceptable to yell at each other, to have conflict on sidelines, to have conflict on fields, then we're going to accept a very toxic culture within the game here. And that's not something that I want to accept or something that I want people to be a part of. So really, you have a choice if you want to wrestle with the pig, because really at the end of the day, you're going to turn out to be muddy and covered in you know what, and the pig's going to be happy. So I'd prefer to not wrestle pigs all outdoor and to set a really high standard and expectation for how we interact as parents, how we interact as administrators, how we interact as coaches, players, and referees within the game, because it is our community and culture to build, and it's our community and culture to break. So it's our choice at the end of the day. Some of the initiatives that we've got going on to try and build some of this culture and change some of those cultural pieces are around the Empower Her initiative, the teal shirt, and then some free education for coaches to help them get better. The Empower Her initiative is targeted at women and girls within the Calgary soccer community and really within the Calgary community at whole. We are targeting coaching, refereeing, playing, and then also an other sphere which we're developing right now, kind of in the background when I've got a few extra moments here and there. We are wanting to run, and when I say wanting to run, a female only learn to train practical course. It had to be moved from March 22nd, but it will be rescheduled into May. So we're attacking the coaches head on and really trying to have female coaches who are qualified at those vital age groups when our girls are dropping out of the game. We want to make sure that women and girls who want to pursue refereeing have got a pathway there. So we hosted a female-only entry-level course that was very well attended. We'll host free play days where players can come in and enjoy the game and enjoy each other's company in a social environment that's free of pressure and adult influence. And then also we're going to have a Women's World Cup watch party on July 20th. So please mark that down in your calendars. Please come out and join us. And we're going to have a little 3v3 tournament pre-game with a whole bunch of young girls within our community. We're working with a club partner. We can't confirm who they are yet, but know that it's coming, and we're really excited about that partnership as well. Where we go. There's call-ups about questions and abusive behavior. I will let Kim and Rachel kind of talk about that one, because they are the experts within that piece. In terms of our referee piece, and this is maybe where I can address one of those questions live now, we have seen a massive influx of people wanting to become referees to the tune of we've had to open up 3 additional entry-level courses this year. So we're on track to potentially educate another almost 175 to 200 new referees this outdoor season. And this is partly due to some of the efforts from our clubs, some of our efforts, but also partnering with a group like Kids Sport and Hockey Calgary to launch Project Ref, where any child who receives Kids Sport funding to participate can then access these referee courses free of charge, and also access the equipment free of charge and an upgrade from a district to a regional level. So we're trying to provide opportunities for employment and provide other opportunities and avenues through the game for people who may have some barriers in front of them. All of these new referees will be receiving a teal shirt, and our teal shirt referees are the first-year referees and are brand new out of the course. It could even be their first game when you see them, and they might be very, very nervous to even blow the whistle. So what I would ask is, when you see these teal shirt referees, is to be gentle, to be understanding that they're going to make mistakes, to be kind and empathetic to the situation that they're in. They're new, they're learning, and we are trying to wrap them in a big woolly coat with our mentorship program to help them be retained within refereeing, but also to progress them. So we know that referees will typically drop out within their first 2 years of refereeing, and we want to try to mitigate that. So the mentorship will be 4 times within their first season, and then ongoing if they still continue to need that. And then also we've recognized that our mentors need some education to become better mentors, so they deliver better mentorship for our new referees. So we're building out a mentor education program right now for all of those mentors. The question in the chat is, you've talked about coaches and club standards. Can I elaborate as to what CMSA is doing differently to improve the quality and consistency of the referees? So what we're doing is we will be launching in the indoor season a full-on referee education program as well for our referees to take part in. The realities is, 1, we couldn't get it built quick enough for our outdoor 2023 season, and 2, there simply wasn't a budget line item for that quite yet, but we're building that into our budgets to make sure that our referees have access to ongoing education to help them improve and to help address some of the consistency within those referees as well. We believe in our referees. We trust the referees, And we know that they are people too. So they will come into a game with some baggage as well, like players, like coaches, and like administrators. So we need to make sure that they're supported and that they're empowered to feel comfortable and know that we are behind them 100%. And then within the coaches piece and even some free education for parents, if you're looking for it, keeping girls in sport is a fairly self-explanatory module. Fantastic information. It's research backed. And these are some strategies from that course that we're trying to implement locally. Stay in the game, obviously, is targeted to 10 to 13-year-olds to really stay in sport and to continue with the game. Respect in Sport for parents is currently free. I believe through Sport Calgary. And this is a course that Hockey Calgary requires all parents to take before your child even steps foot on the ice. So when we compare our environment to hockey and to some other sports, there's even requirements and standards for parents, and we haven't even reached there. Through the NCCP, there's a lot of potential learning for coaches within their online e-learning platform that's accessed through the locker. Things like anti-racism in coaching, asthma management, mental health in sport are all fantastic modules that I would advocate for anyone to be taking. And then lastly, there's a Shred Concussions study going on through the University of Calgary and the Sport Injury Prevention Research Center. If you want more information on that, you can reach out to us at info@calgaryminersoccer.com and we'll be happy to connect you with that study. Some fantastic people are leading that. So I would encourage you to reach out and potentially do both the training or coach training as part of that, but then also have your team as a part of the study. Okay, we have rambled on for a long, long time, and now we'll get to the good bits that everyone's actually tuned in for tonight. The actual information for the 12s and 13s. So we have to try to follow some sort of framework. We have to try to follow some sort of guiding principles. And two of those guiding principles are long-term player development, which is starting to show its age a little bit, but really is the underpinning and the foundation of the game here in Canada, and really what's been built upon for Canada Soccer's grassroots standards as well. You'll see here that each stage is outlined as to certain metrics and certain key areas of focus that can help to guide our practice, but also help to guide our coaches' practices as well. And really, like I was talking about, that long-term player development document has helped to influence where Canada Soccer has developed their own grassroots standards. And this is really a two-page document that all of the country needs to align to. There isn't a set date for it, but there will be a deadline for districts, leagues, and clubs really to make sure that they are aligned to this document at all levels of their programming. And what you'll see through this is within the U12s and U13s, you'll see here that the game format is 9v9. And at U13, it's a choice between 9v9 or 11v11. In some aspects of this document, you'll see choices from Canada Soccer where it says maximum goal size, right? So they're acknowledging that the game looks and feels slightly different in Calgary than it does in Yellowknife, than it does in Halifax, than it does in Toronto. So they're making sure that they're building a framework that's applicable across the entire country and that everyone can try to align to. You'll see maximum game durations there. You'll see ball sizes. You'll see referees and restarts from sidelines being throw-ins. You'll also see a coach qualification right now that is out of date and will need to be revised to a full safe sport roster. And they're in the process of doing that right now. There'll be a question that comes into the chat really quickly, I'm sure, as to why we don't play 11v11 at U13 and why the rest of the province plays 11v11 at U13. 2 years ago, we began the consultation process with our clubs where we said, is 9v9 at U13 a viable option? And is it a format that's going to help players enjoy the game, but also to develop in the game better? So what we did is we looked at heat maps of U13 games. And what we found is the typical area that U13 games were played on the 11-a-side pitch was actually the area of a 9-a-side field anyway. So most players aren't able to play over incredibly long distances on an 11-a-side pitch yet. Most players aren't able to run across the ground on an 11-a-side pitch. And really that format of the game only rewards the early developing players who are potentially bigger, faster, stronger than their peer group, and thus look a little better than their peer group at that time, but doesn't actually give us an accurate representation. So we were actually a leader in this space in the entire country in terms of converting our U13s to a 9v9 format. Now we have BC Soccer, which will have all of their U13 leagues, including their BC SPL, play 9v9 as of 2024. We have Ontario Soccer, who's running a pilot program within their OPDL right now to have their U13s play 9v9. We have Nova Scotia Soccer, who really is a leader in this country in how they're progressing the game, starting to implement 9v9 at U13 as well. So really, we're just ahead of the game a little bit. We are trying to progress the game and trying to push it forward within this province. And we know that there are some areas that are lacking behind in that and lacking behind in some of that leadership. I'm not trying to throw people under the bus or slag them off. Sometimes it's just a workload piece, and this is at the bottom of the pile right now. So we're advocating for 9v9 at U13 across the board and to realign to what Canada Soccer's asked for and what some of the leading provinces are doing within the country. The question will be asked as well, what's the provincial format? Well, the provincial format is controlled by Alberta Soccer, and that's going to be 11v11. So our cup competition at U13 will be 11-a-side. You'll also see further standards from Canada Soccer in terms of roster guidelines, training durations, and other such standards that really are trying to provide some clarity and framework for the game here. You'll also see things here like a festival or league format in terms of the game day format. And what I've learned in Calgary is that the pitchforks and torches come out when the perception of competition is taken away. When the word festival is used, they feel like there's no more competition, that it's inappropriate, that players won't develop, that they won't enjoy the game. And really Canada Soccer is advocating for a festival format all the way up potentially to U13. It's an interesting take. It's one that I believe would have great value, but it's one that still needs some cultural work within the game here in Calgary to really get across and to get through. There's a call-up question rule in the chat. If Kim or Rachel, who are the experts with the call-up rules, if you want to jump in and steal that one. And then potentially also the tier 1 piece as well. If either one of you want to tackle that, that would be amazing. Speaking to the tier 1 and tier 2s, they're going to have a split season, as we know, where you will have play up until the end of July and then an August break. And then you will have games within September for those tier 1 and tier 2s. The tier 3s and 4s will have a single season with more regionalized play, hopefully, depending on those team entries and also depending on the division size. That's our goal, is to try and keep a more potentially recreational player closer to home and make it easy for them to access the game. You'll see as well a 9v9 format and club supplied goals at U12. So I would encourage you to bring a tape measure with you for your U12 games. I'd encourage you to measure the goals. And then I would encourage you to report back so that there is some alignment in terms of why some goals will not be 6x18 and why they will vary from club to club. We've been advocating for 2 years for these clubs to be standardizing these goal sizes, and it's simply not good enough anymore. It won't be taking place any longer in outdoor 2024, but there is potential that there'll be a couple of clubs that either have been a little delinquent in changing their goals over or just don't care enough to give the players a great experience. You'll likely see goals 8 feet tall by 16 feet, which are far too large for players of this size. There's a question as to why no scores are public at U12. This is in alignment with long-term player development, where they have said that scores and standings should not be available from U12 and below, as really the focus for scores and standings becomes an adult piece We all know that the kids keep score. They all know what the result was at the end of the game. But then to publicly have it accessible so that potentially some adult egos are stroked really just doesn't fit the needs of the player. It doesn't have a developmental mindset within the games. And really, it doesn't promote the right values at a really young grassroots level. So we're not going to be having any public scores and standings. This has been something that's been in place for a very long time within Calgary and should be a cultural norm by this point. Just because it's tiered doesn't mean that it even needs scores and standings, if I'm brutally honest. The tiers are a way to get like with like games or closer games, more meaningful competition for the players, and give them a good experience. I want to make sure that we chat as well about the player fees and what CMSA brings in into our doors so that there's a transparency in terms of how we operate. We want to make sure that people understand the amount of money that is provided to CMSA from the clubs and from the registration fees. So this is on a per player basis in terms of the CMSA fee. So you can evaluate where you've registered your child and what their player fee is that comes to CMSA. From that CMSA fee, there's actually an Alberta soccer fee that gets paid to ASA and then to Canada Soccer and et cetera, et cetera. So out of that CMSA fee, $24 actually we don't even see, and we filter it upwards in the system. So what's left over then is that CMSA fee. And what you can see is your price per match day. So your price per match across 14 matches is under $10 per game per player. This pays for our fields, pays for our referees, and pays for a lot of other pieces. So as you can see, if you find that that's great value for money, amazing. If you find that that's not great value for money, then I would encourage you to come help us write some more grants so we can continue to make our fees lower, or to potentially pass on these kinds of savings to you as parents and to consumers at the end of the day. There's always a question as to where do the CMSA fees go? And so the majority of these fees go to booking fields for games, paying referees, and other league-related expenses. What those league-related expenses are not are salaries for CMSA or club salaries. The fees that come to CMSA do not go to pay for any of our club staff salaries. There's also, out of that fee, a facility fund contribution out of every single player. So part of these fees contribute towards future facility projects and upgrades so that we can continue to provide more facilities and better facilities for our growing game. That's a common theme through all of the surveys is we need better facilities and we need more facilities 5 years ago. So we know that this is something that we're trying to catch up on, and we need funds in order to be able to do that. A quick analysis was if every single team from U14 to U19 wanted to play 11v11 year round, we would need a total of 15 facilities running every single evening from 5 p.m. till 10 p.m. and every weekend from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. through the indoor season. So we would need 15 full fields operating essentially year round. Which we don't have, which means that we have to adjust to our facility constraints and make sure that we can provide a good experience based on our constraints. There's also a donation to Kidsport that goes back to fund some of the players who are on those programs. Kidsport contribute to Calgary, to the Calgary soccer landscape. It's either a number of 250,000 or it's 500,000. Those two numbers rattle around in my mind. So it's one of the two, but in terms of registration fees and other pieces, so they're a massive contributor to the game here in Calgary. So we want to make sure that that program is viable and can be financially accessed for years to come. Then, of course, there's that piece that I talked about that goes to Alberta and Canada Soccer. And then a small portion of these fees help to pay for the CMSA staff and ensure that we are trying to run Calgary soccer as efficiently as possible and that we continue to innovate. Really, it helps to keep the lights and heat on at the Calgary West Center and also at the office, and try to keep a little bit of ink in the printer. And that's really where those fees all go that we collect anyway. There's also a piece here that everyone needs to be aware of in terms of the Alberta Soccer Association insurance that any registered player has access to. If or when an injury happens, you need to go and fill out a form on Alberta Soccer's website. It's under the members tab, and it has to be filled out within those first 30 days of injury. That's due to their insurance provider requirements, and you should be doing this even if you like stub your toe on the field. What then happens is any sort of personal insurance funds that you might have get used first to cover some of your rehab and recovery. And then Alberta Soccer's insurance kicks in after that personal money has run out. Some of the physio and rehab expenses add up incredibly quickly and will exhaust those personal funds very, very quickly. So it's important that if you're going to have even a slightly longer term or mid-term injury, that you do have access to some of this insurance money that will help alleviate those costs for you. There's still some questions being answered. Thanks very much, Kim and Rachel, for attending to those. I will look to play one last little video that really summarizes what we're trying to create here in Calgary and for CMSA. This is a registration promo video, but if you could take away the key pieces and the key themes of what we're trying to create, it'll give you a good sense of the direction that we're heading. And really what starts here is community and culture and collaboration with our membership. So what I would like to do is thank you all for being a part of tonight. Without you, none of this happens. Without the hard work of numerous volunteers and clubs and coaches and people within the system and within the game, none of this happens. And so we want to make sure that we're putting the kids right at the center of everything that we do and trying to improve things constantly for them to have a better experience and better opportunity within the game. Thank you again to everyone. You could be anywhere in the world doing anything right now, and you've chosen to spend some time with us. So thank you for spending time on a Wednesday evening here. We value it and appreciate it. And if you've got any sort of further questions, any concerns, anything that you need addressed, please reach out to us. We are very accessible across all of the social media channels, as well as through that general email box and through telephone. That's the direct office line. So what I like to do is I like to leave everyone with that image on the left-hand side of your screen, where if we continue to pull things in the similar and same direction, we'll get further quicker. Whereas if we work in opposition of each other and maybe work blindly of each other, we're going to struggle to continue to move the game forward. So thank you for your investment. Thank you for your passion. And thank you for working with us in this upcoming season ahead. We'll stick around for a few minutes here to answer any sort of questions that might pop up. So feel free to populate the Q&A. And once again, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I love it. There's some people that just stick around hoping that someone will ask a question and there's a little bit more info. For those who have stuck around, I think that there was a question there about a retreat line at U12 and U13. There won't be any sort of retreat line. It'll be a normal offside at halfway. So just if I didn't cover that, I apologize, but I'll make sure that that's crystal clear in our communications as well. Good question came into the chat. So is there a standard set for jersey colors, as in light for home and dark for away? We have not set any sort of standard like that with our clubs. We know that our clubs invest a lot of money in their kit. So if there was something like that to occur, we would have to go through a bit of a 3-year kind of phase-in piece, so that old jerseys get phased out and new ones are bought in the appropriate color. So not yet. But it could be something that comes eventually. It's always kind of best practice to get your kids to pack both colors, just in case they have to change at a game, and best to bring both sets of kit to any one of their games. Another question here, that tier 3s might be picking back up in September. That could be a club only program as well to keep players going. So what I would do is I would reach out for more details on what that September kind of looks like for those players, and get some more clarity from your club on that. Question about parent assistant referees. So in the past, parents have been utilized for offsides or calling the ball in touch or out of touch. So is this the case for the upcoming season, or should the ref be covering all the calls? We typically trust our referees to be doing that work. We would appreciate help, but typically our referees don't usually rely on parent volunteers or volunteers in terms of offside. They usually just get them to call the ball in and out. Within a 9-a-side format, we believe that our referees are plenty capable of covering the ground, and being able to at least closely see offside based on their positioning. We talk about referee development being a part of this as well. We know that it's going to be a stretch for some of them, and we know that it's going to be difficult for some of them, but this is also a referee development piece for them to get in the right position and in a position to make the appropriate call. So these 9-a-side games will likely stretch them a little bit, but we want to make sure that there's that opportunity for their own growth to be making those calls and to be in control of the game. It's a great question, though. I appreciate that. Okay, kind of hang out for the last couple of minutes here. If there's no other questions, if there are, you're in injury time now, so get them in quickly. And if not, then please have a great evening, and thanks for joining us. Can we please go over the career path again? Career path. I'm hoping you're talking about either the coaching kind of pathway, or are you talking about the player pathway? If you could just clarify that in the chat, or in the Q&A, that would be amazing. Perfect. Player pathway. Right on. No problem at all. So player pathway, this is something that is fairly standard across the Canada soccer landscape, but there's obviously different nuances depending on where you are. All players will typically enter the game in one of these 3 bottom phases and stages in terms of active start, fundamentals, and learn to train. So those are divided up based on ages, but then also stages of development as well. Then what happens is these players will flow up through the diagram, hopefully, if they continue with soccer and they love the game, into either community leagues for Soccer for Life, competitive leagues, Soccer for Life for the youth, or into the train-to-train stage in terms of those developmental leagues and standards-based leagues within the country. What this looks like locally is that CMSA operates at stages 1, 2, 3, and this 7 stage in terms of Soccer for Life community and competitive. And then the AYSL would be the avenue for developmental leagues and standards-based leagues in that train-to-train kind of stage. You will see players flow across the diagram like this at a youth level, where they might go into standards-based leagues, they might come back, or they might go straight into Rex programs or even into youth national teams and full-on residency programs in Vancouver. Then they obviously flow up through the diagram potentially, and they flow into senior national teams and senior professional football with locally anyway, the Whitecaps as a local MLS team, and then our local CPL team in Cavalry FC. If they don't make a professional grade and they still love the game, maybe they've got some ability and they're playing in a university or college level. Maybe they play in USL2 or UWS, or even into our newly launched semi-pro league of League One Alberta. There's also men's and women's leagues locally in terms of CUSA and Calgary Women's, and also an AMSL, which is a provincial league in the competitive Soccer for Life stream and bucket. So I hope that that's answered the question. If there's any questions specifically around the player pathway, more than happy to answer them and to address them. Great question, Charles. What you can do is shoot me a quick email and I will send it over to you right now. I'll send it to you the next day or two. I'll send you both versions, what it looks like locally, but then also what the kind of general one is as well. It's probably not a bad resource to have on our website as well, and it's a great suggestion. So we will look to put that up in the coming months. Charles, shoot me an email, please, and I'll just reply to that for you. Okay. If there's no other questions, the last 10 of us who have gone the distance, thank you very much. I hope you have a great evening. And if you do have any other further questions, please reach out to info@calgaryminersoccer.com, or feel free to give our office a call and look to seek out some information if you need. I'll leave that up on the screen one more time if anyone's looking at it. And if there are no other questions, have a great evening. And thank you so much for attending. Looking forward to seeing you all on the pitch. And please come up and tap me on the shoulder, introduce yourself, and looking forward to the discussion. So thanks very much, everyone, and take care.